Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our, what we hope will be a very upbeat conversation about culture and how culture shapes the world. We have two great speakers. To my immediate left, Dr. Katherine Fleming, who is president and CEO of the Getty Trust, and Noah Horowitz, CEO of Art Basel. Raise your hand who needs money here. No, I'm kidding. But I think one of the things that I think is fascinating about investing in culture, I'm going to start with Art Basel, actually, is much like Silicon Valley, everybody tries to replicate what you've done, Noah. And I think we know that many investments in culture punch below their weight. So why do you think that is?
Well, I think in the end, there's a lot of ways of investing in culture. A lot of things get over-consultanted, right? You have to follow artists. And that's how we built our business. I'm pretty sure that's how the Getty built its foundations. And it's very easy to lose track of that in a world of strategy, top-down, government-led policy, and all these great things. But I think fundamentally, following artists is the easiest and surest path to success, but also a very easy thing to overlook with so much money on the table, so many ideas and ambition through and through.
What about for you? Because I'm sure a lot of people also want you to partner and such. Tell me a little bit about what you think often doesn't work.
What doesn't work in a partnership is when one side wants money and the other side has it. What does work in a partnership is when there are things on both sides that each side needs, and then organically out of that some third thing evolves.
Let's, one of the things I think to anchor the conversation, let's talk about your mission and purpose. People might know, I'll start with you, Noah. People know what Art Basel is, perhaps, but give us a little bit of a sense of its evolution and kind of where it's going next.
Yeah, I think people are broadly familiar with what Art Basel is. I'm not actually sure that a lot of people know what Art Basel is, interestingly. We were founded in 1970 by Ernst Beiler, as a great gallerist and dealer, really brought the American avant-garde to Europe and led the path at the time. And he conspired with some other gallerists and dealers to create a platform to support the market for galleries and dealers and to rival the auction houses. Fast forward 50 years later, we're now a business that hosts the largest events of their kind in 4 different cities: Basel, Miami Beach, Hong Kong, and we just did our first edition in the Grand Palais in Paris 2 weeks ago. And we are in front of hundreds of thousands of people that come through our halls annually. But in the end, we exist to power the careers of artists and to support everything that they do and to create these inspiring moments of connectivity with collectors, with patrons, with museums and institutions, but also ultimately to power cities. We've transformed cities like Miami Beach. Hong Kong itself, is a huge amount to Art Basel, but we owe a huge amount to Hong Kong. And even Paris 2 weeks ago, which is the greatest cultural capital to end all cultural capitals, you could feel the city vibrant and transformed by all the attendees, by all this extraordinary investment now getting made in the city. And so fundamentally, we exist to really advance careers and create these extraordinary opportunities.
When you see all these ancillary events now that go on during Art Basel, I certainly know in Hong Kong and Miami, one of the things that's interesting about where both of you sit is you basically, I think, are an interesting case study in how you can create something from scratch. Katherine, I think about the Getty Trust as also essentially a legacy that it's a foundation on which you build and innovate. So talk more about what you do.
So the Getty is not just one thing.
Right.
Most people think of it as being a museum. We also are sort of a Médecins Sans Frontières for the preservation of art. We have teams that work all around the world on cultural heritage. We have a foundation that makes grants. We have a research institute. And then supporting it all, we have a very, very significant fund, the Trust, that was bequeathed to us by J. Paul Getty at his death. So my job as CEO is, on the one hand, a very conservative one, namely to make sure that an entity, the founder of which wanted to exist in perpetuity, does in fact exist in perpetuity. It's easy to get used to having money and then to wind up spending too much of it. And on the other hand, my job is to be really, really creative and make sure that strategically the things that we're doing are not simply in accordance with the contemporary world, but in many instances leading it. And it's difficult to do those two at the same time.
And let's pause. I want to follow up a second because I want to talk on a personal level. We talk about culture as something like 30,000 feet. Let's bring it down to why it matters. I mean, talk about why it matters to you and why should anyone care about culture and make it a priority in their communities?
Well, you can see, here we are at the end of the day. Culture is always the thing that's added on. Oh, it would be nice if we had something on culture. But culture is the most fundamental thing that defines human existence. I would argue that all of these conversations around AI and success are sort of missing the point if they aren't looking at the fact that culture is the first starter in human civilization. Culture is what makes us happy, what makes it possible for us to express emotion. We had a couple sessions ago about different forms of intelligence, and noticeably absent was a reference to something we call emotional intelligence, and that's what the world of art is all about. It's also about asking the most profound fundamental questions. Why were we born? Why are we going to die? And for some reason, human beings are incapable of answering those questions without creating simulacra of the world in which they live, writing novels, telling stories, creating poems, painting pictures, in order to be able to look at their own reality reflected back at them. And if that isn't important, I don't really know what is, but I have some scientific stuff for you later for the skeptics.
Well, we shall get to the scientific stuff, the impact of art. You can talk about it on a personal level too, Noah, but one of the obvious questions is the impact that AI and technology is going to have on art. I met somebody here who wrote a book in 12 hours. That, of course, puts the fear of, in a journalist. But how do you think about sort of the position of art right now, and is it under threat?
Look, I mean, there are millions of questions, billions of questions around the role of AI. I mean,
and we're going to ask them all in 12 minutes and 6 seconds.
But the very term of AI has become almost banal through a cultural lens, actually. I think AI can play a dramatically important role in getting the message out, accelerating opportunity, and creating the basis for new ideas. But in the end, and I think Katherine would agree with this, I mean, art culture is contextually defined. It's an emotive thing, and it also is a bridge maker. And I struggle to see, although I can see how you could create AI-generated art for a corporate lobby or the airport, fundamentally, meaning is derived through these interfaces between people that are responsive to context, other ideas. Art is a game. I struggle to see ultimately the end state of that, but I'm sure that artists leveraging AI and tech can start using machine learning and other things to do vast things that we can't anticipate today that are, contributing to culture in this moment in time in ways that we can't possibly anticipate.
Yeah. It's like I don't think you can separate the act of thinking from the act of writing. Like, writing is how you crystallize your thoughts as certainly a writer and an artist, so it's hard to just have a machine do it for you. You were going to mention some scientific statistics. What do you want to say with regard to maybe, as I suppose, the scientific case for art?
Well, people aren't aware of it. People think investing in art is like investing in a market. In some contexts, it is investing in a market. You want to sell at a higher price than you bought. But we're just starting to realize that art has all sorts of other knock-on effects on the economy. There's something called the prescriptive art movement, which recognizes the fact that viewing art is literally good for your health. All of you, all 7 of you who get up in the morning and go to the gym because you think it's good for your health, or you take a supplement, or you know that you need to chill out or not be on your computer at night. All of these things that you do that you know are good for you, looking at art is one of them. We know that when you're looking at art, it reduces your blood pressure, for instance. We know that you get an endorphin rush when you're in an art space, and this is something that is just starting to be explored now. Doctors are starting to literally prescribe art viewing to their patients, and this is just the very, very beginning, I think, of our understanding of the extent to which culture is a fundamental human need, and institutions such as ours we ourselves haven't been aware of the fact that one of the things that we're doing is meeting this really fundamental human need. And that's super exciting to me.
I'm going to ask my insurer to write off my next ticket to Art Basel. But talk about how do you think about it on a personal level, too? Because you came from Sotheby's. Your life has been immersed in art. How does it resonate with you?
Well, look, it's a path I chose, right? Because of deep curiosity and culture, context. Fundamentally, I came to this world through the basic baseline question of how value is created. Like, why is one thing valuable and something not? How does something sustain value? All these extraordinary things that we see in institutions, museums. How do you collect them? Are you buying an object? Are you buying an idea? All of that, to me, is just fundamentally interesting. Now, leading Art Basel, there's millions of things that we can do as we shape and impact that. Speaking of art and health, I mean, and it's relevant in the Saudi context. I mean, actually in Basel in June at our flagship fair, we worked with the Jameel Art and Health Lab, who's doing and underwriting extraordinarily important research in this realm in partnership with the WHO, with NYU, and we did a panel with them. And there's a lot, to Katherine's point, that I think is going to start emerging in this space as wellness as a very fundamental thing becomes more and more important. But to pick up on the other side of that, one thing that we see with Art Basel is just the extraordinary impact that events like this can have in servicing and developing local ecosystems in the cities in which we operate. And I think there's more and more understanding of the pass-through value that art and culture can be, not just in tourism and retail spend, but in fundamentally shifting people's views of the society in which they live, right? Like, that's very transformationally important.
And I think there's an appreciation here, is it Diriyah, that we're going to go see, that you want to be preserving the genuine culture of the place that you're in. You're not just importing artists, you're actually preserving. Give me some sense for both of you, and I'll start with you, Noah, of advice on how people partner. I mean, let's talk about some of the partnerships. And I'm actually, instead of necessarily talking about Art Basel, I'd love each of you to talk about something that you admire that's not the realm in which you're in, that you think there's lessons to be had either for how to partner on culture or what you think is sort of an excellent example of this in practice.
Well, I think you can look into history to find, some of the great philanthropists of their generation, right, that leaned in, that believed in art and created institutions, whether it's the Rockefellers with MoMA, for me, Dia, I think, which exists in New York, but is also, the great institution to support a lot of land art, art that was made sort of anti-institutionally, but has helped define a lot of, the dialogue over the last many years. And I think in the end, to come back to where we started, one has to follow artists, but you also need a stakeholder at the top that is willing to put their reputation on the line, that's going to make a decision and is okay with being wrong. And I think all of these things are important parts of how culture is defined when we look over time. So I think having a real agency to be right, but also to be wrong, and to stand behind a vision is incredibly and fundamentally important.
How about for you?
So one of the things that impresses me most are institutions that have figured out that culture is much more than looking at objects in a museum or things on a wall. I would agree with you that Dia is a great example of that. You have outdoor aspects. Crystal Bridges also is another example of it. But in terms of successful partnerships, for us, some of our most successful partnerships have been overseas. We did an amazing project on Tutankhamun's tomb, for instance, that was designed to help make the site accessible yet protected from tourism. We think that the core metric, wrongly, for whether or not we're succeeding is how many people come and see our stuff. This is starting to be a huge problem for some sites. There are far too many people going to see them, trampling all over the very thing that is so wondrous and in the process ruining it. So some of the best partnerships are also in the digital realm. We've done stuff around Palmyra, around Persepolis, that make it possible for people to have really, really serious engagement with sites without actually going there or without trampling all over them in the way that they would in a sort of traditional visit context. So those things impress me a lot.
I have to say one thing with Getty is I love the sense of place there. It's very meditative. I suppose, you know, Art Basel, it's different because you come through, but you do have an impact, you know, long after you lead. One thing, I know our time is running down. This is an investment conference. I'd be remiss if I didn't say, let me say $100 million. If I were to give you that money, how would each of you deploy it in a way that you think would have a lasting impact that would shape society, since that's what we're talking about?
Look,
no, I'll go with you first.
If you're going to give me $100 million, I'm going to double it because she doesn't need.
Oh, she doesn't need
money.
your money. Okay.
So I'm going to take $200 million. Look, I've started imagining, and we, the business, started imagining, what does Art Basel look like beyond the realm of the fair, right? You know, we're a business that's almost intentionally chaotic to create a moment of urgency, which is important in a market context at a fundamental level. But as we've expanded and grown globally and started thinking more and more about what we can do as an organization, you know, there's a world in which we wonder what it looks like if we slow down and move in the other direction. What would an institution of permanence look like somewhere? How could we support and service?
So you're almost getting the sense of place that Getty has in some respects.
Let's ask the question and wonder out loud what that could look like for an institution that's so positioned in the minds of people as being temporary to have a real fixity and a rootedness somewhere. It's an open question.
It'll cost more than $100 million.
I'm going to give the money back to you. What?
Thank you.
Yeah, he's not taking your money. So what would you do? What would you do?
So I would do a couple things. I would increase the capacity of my foundation to give money away. One of the core things that we do is give money away in support of artists and things connected to the arts. We need our money because we live off of our money. We live off an endowment. Anyone who understands how endowments work will understand that while we look rich on paper, we wouldn't be rich if we spent our money. That's the paradox of having an endowment. But if someone in this room wants to give me $100 million, I will be delighted to put their name on a fabulous new educational facility around art for K through 12 education. We have an amazing program. We bus hundreds of thousands of children every year up to the Getty to have an experience that most of us get in our daily lives, which is to look at beautiful things and be in a beautiful place. But we're really lucky. We're among the elite. Most people don't have that in their daily lives. So I would use my $100 million, but I'll share some of it with you, Noah. I would use my $100 million to make it possible for more people who don't have that experience now to have it.
So I'm going to give each of you some closing thoughts on this with regard to what you want people to take away in terms of how you think about just the overall topic of culture, investing in culture, and the prioritizing of culture as we're talking about development. I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, I mean, look, I come from a field of literally studying how money is made in our industry, and of course that's interesting, but culture is much more than an investment and a buy here and sell there.
An investment's much more than just money, too.
And an investment's a lot more than money. I think for me, as we look at the world, we see the bridging power of art and the pride that local communities can take to rally around. Even being in Riyadh here for a few days, you feel this extraordinary energy and civic pride in what's being created and the rapidity with which it's being created. So I think anything we can do as a society to support that and to create that connectivity builds empathy, it builds opportunity, and I think we as an institution at Art Basel, exist solely to power that and to create more of that.
Katherine, last word goes to you.
So corny as it sounds, we've been speaking a lot about success. For me, success, a successful life, the success I want my children to have is the success of being happy without inflicting pain on others. And we know that art does just that. It makes people happy, and for the most part, it doesn't inflict pain on others. And I would hope that people would understand, therefore, that culture is really, really core to the most fundamental form of human success.
I cannot think of a better place to end than there. Please join me in thanking our two guests, and thank you for joining us for this final session. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Noah.